Patchie from Geeks, Destroy and Conquer on lockdown, answering questions for Splattered Plastic, so come on, let's go. First horror movie I ever saw was American Werewolf in London, and my mum and dad had got it out of the video store. I'd gone to bed, they were downstairs watching it. I came downstairs to get something to eat. I think this is a story that everyone my age who's into horror movies can tell. I came downstairs and I looked in through the gap in the door, and it was at the exact moment that David has the dream where the biker, werewolf Nazis come and that bit. And I just remember looking through the window, through the door, and being like, oh my God, what's happening there? So the next day, when mum and dad went out to go to work or wherever they were going the next day, the video was obviously still there because it wasn't due back at the video store till that night. So me and my sister watched it, and yeah, that was it for me. I was in hook, line and sinker with horror movies, and I can remember being in the video store as well, and seeing the big massive posters for these like gory movies and just being like, what's going on here? I need to know about this. And yeah, it was kind of me hooked then from day one with American Werewolf in London. Favourite decade of horror? It's tough to pick just one, because obviously, you're going back all the way to the start of the 20th century, really. Things like F.W. Murnau and stuff like that, really, like with their like groundbreaking stories that they were telling. I think that the 70s had a little bit of everything, didn't it? The 70s was really groundbreaking because there was some new stuff done with practical effects and storytelling and that kind of thing. But for me, it's got to be the 80s. Obviously, that was my era when the movies were coming out. We were getting them on VHS and stuff. And there's something for everyone. There's horror movies you can watch on a date, horror movies that'll turn your stomach. There's horror movies that'll keep you awake at night thinking about what could have happened to you if you were in that situation. And there's ones that are just a good laugh, Yeah, a little bit of everything. And I think that's borne out by the fact that now, in the 21st century, in the second decade of the 21st century, and you're seeing that kind of 80s revival, that going back to that kind of 80s storytelling and visual effects. So they've stood the test of time more than anything else has, really, I think. So it's got to be the 80s for me. Again, it's tough to pick just one, isn't it? George Romero's done so much for horror over the years, and come a bit more, if you go a bit more modern, you look at somebody like Hideo Nakata, who's some of his stuff's really good. His horror is about, for me, it's about the horror of the mundane, of the everyday. It's some people just trying to live their lives with some kind of shadow hanging over them, which is really horrible, thing to imagine yourself going through. But for me, it's got to be Dario Argento. Purely because Suspiria is one of my favourite movies of all time, if not my favourite movie of all time, and that's because that was the first time I think that I saw a horror movie as being a complete package, a work of art, as opposed to just being something that you sit down and watch for an hour and a half and it frightens you. It's the music, the direction, the lighting, everything. I mean, it's a director's complete vision on film. Sometimes with Argento, that can be to the detriment of the script. At the expense of the script, you get this wonderful visual feast and something to listen to and stuff. But yeah, it's Argento every time for me. He's put out some really, really amazing looking, sounding and feeling movies that kind of just grab you. So yeah, it's going to be Argento every day for me. Suspense every time. I do love to see the brilliant practical effects in movies. I do really love to kind of figure out how they've done them and stuff. But for me, it's got to be suspense, because not everybody can identify with being squashed by a steamroller or being electrocuted by a corpse that's come back from the dead or whatever. But everybody knows what it's like to be followed. Everybody knows what it's like to think you might not be on your own. Everybody knows what it's like to hear a noise outside and think to yourself, am I going to go out and investigate that? Everybody understands that kind of suspense, that kind of terror. So for me, yeah, it's suspense every day. A cult of middle class or middle to upper class English Satanists living in a country house and chasing people around the area is far more scary for me than a zombie coming back from dead in a voodoo ritual. I'd say that, first of all, if you look at Blu-rays, there's a push, isn't there, to clean up prints, get them on Blu-ray, get the clearest, most crystal clear possible resolution you can get on a movie. And sometimes I think that's to the detriment of your enjoyment of the film. You know, some of the stuff really looks better not cleaned up, you know. I mean, I grew up watching VHSs, so for me, that third generation, fourth generation copy, grainy type effect, you want to see some of your effects like that. It's where you're kind of trying to figure out what's going on. Sometimes if it's a bit too clean, it kind of takes away from it. It looks a bit fake, doesn't it? You know, and you want that little bit of gritty realism in there. So I'd land somewhere in the middle and go for DVDs. Just purely for ease of use and being able to just get a discount and bang it on, and you know, having that kind of increase in picture quality, but not too much that you can see you know, you can see the strings if you like. So yeah, I go DVD, although I have got a soft spot for VHSs. They do look brilliant, don't they, on the shelf? Again, it's a tough one to look at. I think I'd probably miss out some of the more obvious Friday 13th, Halloween's type, My Bloody Valentine's, and I'll go for Deep Red. I'll go for Deep Red, Dario Argento's Deep Red, just purely because it's so, you know, it's obviously a lot of it is filmed from the point of view of the killer, with that kind of great detail that Argento always puts into his movies. But for me, it kind of makes you question what you're seeing, makes you question how you feel, how you react to this kind of thing. You know, whether you have that little bit of sympathy with the killer or not. You know, it kind of plays with it a little bit rather than it just being a straight revenge attack type thing. It's kind of a, what's going on? Why is the killer doing what they're doing? It gets inside your head a bit more than, say, something like Slumber Party Massacre might. Best zombie movie, City of the Living Dead. Definitely City of the Living Dead. You know, so many cliches in zombie movies, isn't there? So much so that when you see a zombie do something different in a movie like Run, people go, zombies shouldn't be able to do that. And then there's a big discussion about whether that's canon or not, whether zombies can run. But for me, it's got to be City of the Living Dead. It's kind of, I think it was one of the first foreign zombie movies that I'd seen, one of the first non-English zombie movies I'd seen, and it's kind of got that kind of plodding sense of dread, the kind of suspense that I love in horror movies. But the zombies themselves are just so, they're just so fresh, aren't they? They're just all wet and like like they've not been dead long and stuff. And there's the scene where with the intestines, the death through vomit of intestines, which is just absolutely brilliant. I love it. I think it's one of the best zombie movies out there. The story is really good as well, and you find yourself really rooting for the survivors. Which, let's be honest, when we watch a lot of movies, we can't wait to see them all die. Vampire, definitely. I hesitate to say Dracula, even though Dracula's the most famous vampire of all. I'd have to say vampires. I'm obsessed with them, really, to be honest. And it's the whole thing of whether, I think it's the whole immortality, but with a heavy price to pay for it, kind of thing. So whether you're really aggressive, doesn't matter, kill everybody type vampire, or whether you're the more reluctant way to the world vampire, like say Louis in the Vampire Chronicles. Yeah, I'm all about the vampire. And Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Keanu Reeves vehicle is absolutely brilliant, and I watch that about 4 times a month now. It's probably my most watched movie of all time. Yeah, vampires all the way for me. Although, give massive shout out to The Creature from the Black Lagoon, Gilman. The absolutely brilliant idea, the character's brilliant, and the underwater swimming scenes are just so graceful that it's kind of beautiful in the way that it terrifies you. So Dracula first, vampires first, Creature from the Black Lagoon second. So I grew up before, obviously, for me, I've got a love of 80s heavy metal and punk rock and stuff, and that kind of ties in with the whole collecting and obsessive feeling that I have about horror movies. So I kind of grew up with artists like Derek Riggs and Ed Repka and stuff doing like, you know, the Iron Maiden, Megadeth type covers. So I love that kind of thing, that kind of hyper realistic, really colourful stuff. So I would say that for me, it's probably Graham Humphreys, and we had him on our show a couple of months ago. A couple of weeks ago, I'd say Graham Humphreys is my favourite horror artist, just because he does that kind of realistic, but so colourful and so vibrant work. And a lot of the stuff that he's done, obviously, has been for the UK releases of a lot of movies that I love. So, for the likes of Nightmare on Elm Street, one of the first things I think of when I think about that is the art that Graham Humphreys did for it. So, yeah, he gets my vote for favourite artist. Why not? No, for, you know, you've got to look at that. Everyone loves that escapism, don't they? And you know, it's being able to put yourself through something pretty much in the safety of your own home. I mean, you'd have to be pretty unfortunate to watch a movie about a serial killer stalking the neighborhood and then be killed by a serial killer that night when you go to bed. So it's kind of putting yourself in that situation where, you know, you can feel that dread, you can feel what that person's feeling. You know, you're scared for them, you want to know what's going to happen to them, you need to know how they're going to get out of it. But also I think there's that morbid curiosity that exists, not in everybody, but in horror movie fans, where you want to kind of see what the killer's going to do next, or you want to see, you know, how the demons are going to take their revenge and that kind of thing. And yeah, it's escapism, pure pure fantasy, isn't it?